thank you all for coming. I'm going to give a quick overview on Medicaid and some of the changes with Medicaid disability and waiver changes that happened this summer. From talking to Sarah, she said you might want to step back and explain what Medicaid is too, because a lot of our parents don't even have some basic knowledge of those systems. And so this is kind of a brief overview. And I'll probably say it a couple times, but I work for About Special Kids, which helps parents who have children with disability. You can call them and they'll answer any question or anything you need under the sun. And I am their parent trainer, and I do all their trainings here in Central Indiana. And one of the trainings that I do is healthcare financing. And it is 6 hours long, and it goes into depth on all of these things we're going to talk about tonight. So if you need more information or you feel like you need more information, that's where I would start. I also have a couple of handouts over here. So feel free that everybody needs to take one, but if you want more information, there's one for Ask for About Special Kids, and there's one about a letter about what ABA benefits for Medicaid and who gets covered and who doesn't. So those are over here, correct, Sarah? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Okay, so let's get started with Medicaid. When I say Medicaid, I know most of you think of Who's Your Health Wise, correct? Because that's what they call the children's Medicaid here in the state of Indiana. Everything changed in 2013 when they passed ACA. When we got our Affordable Care Act, everything in everybody's life changed about health care, okay? So the Indiana Medicaid system also changed. They changed their methodology to use only your modified gross income to determine eligibility. Okay, so what that means is there were 34 categories of Medicaid. There are now 4. And this is why if you talk to people who work in the Medicaid system, they're all a little confused right now because things have changed a whole lot for them. Okay? But now they're just going under the MAGI rules, the modified adjusted gross income rules. They used to have to get a lot of things. They used to have to look at your assets and did you own a car and did you have a house and all that. Now this is only for Who's Your Health Wise. But it changed to modified adjusted gross income. So technically, you could go on healthcare.gov, put in your information, and if you qualify for Who's Your Health Wise, it would send it to the state. This is all, it's supposed to do this theoretically. It's not as smooth as it sounds right now. They are better at it than they were last year. But your information would be sent to the state, and someone from the state would contact you about qualifying for Medicaid in our state. Okay. Here is some of the MAGI, the adjusted gross income that makes you eligible. For package A, this is for pretty very low income families. This is the age of the child. So the younger the child, the more money you can make, the more you can qualify for Who's Your Health Wise. Package C, under package C, you can make more money. Only your children can be on package C. Adults cannot be on package C. And you have to pay a small premium every month. It's usually between $5 and $30 a month, depending on how much money to have your children on package C. So these are all the general changes that were in Medicaid. The other thing I wanted to explain, because I was trying to explain this to Sarah and she didn't seem to think anybody knew about this, is that Medicaid is a joint finance venture, okay? For every 38 cents we put in our Medicaid system, the federal government gives us 62 cents, okay? There are millions of dollars in Medicaid that go unused by the state of Indiana because every time we cut Medicaid dollars, we cut our 38 cents and they don't match. Okay, so we have to put in our money before the federal government puts in their money. Okay? Because of the Affordable Care Act that happened to everybody, all Medicaid programs that I'm going to talk about tonight have minimal essential coverage because all plans going forward as of 2015, they all have to have minimal essential coverage. Okay? So even your private insurance has to have minimal essential coverage. Those people that were squawking, I want my cheap insurance I've always had, and you know, the Affordable Care Act ruined that. It didn't ruin it. You didn't have real insurance. You didn't have minimal essential coverage for things. Many people would be in a car accident and realize their health insurance didn't cover hospitalization or ambulance service or, you know, minimal coverage. And so the Health Care Act made sure that every policy that's out there has minimal essential coverage. And so Medicaid also has to have minimal essential coverage. So it has to have coverage in at least 10 of these, in all 10 of these categories. It doesn't specify how much coverage it has to have or what it has to cover, but it has to cover something in each one of these 10 categories. Okay, so that's kind of my overview for Medicaid and what it provides. That's not why I came here to talk tonight. I came to talk about Medicaid disability, okay? And the big old changes that happened this summer. So the state of Indiana used to be what's called a 209B state, and that means nothing to anybody, except that when you applied for Medicaid disability, you also had to go and apply for supplemental insurance income separately. The federal government did not, and the state did not talk to each other. So you could be disabled and you could get your federal income every month, but be denied insurance by the state of Indiana because there was two separate eligibilities. Okay? Now we're becoming a 1634 state, and that means all the eligibility is together. So if you qualify for one, you automatically qualify for the other. Okay? All right? So what that means is that anybody who was receiving SSI but was denied their Medicaid disability insurance is going to automatically get their Medicaid disability insurance. Also, the flip side, there's a few people that were getting Medicaid disability but couldn't get SSI for their child, and they would become eligible for that as well. Okay? So, in essence, what happens is there's one person determining disability now, not the state and the federal government. They're just using one line of who is disabled and when they're disabled. Okay? Okay. So to apply for Medicaid disability, now you have to go to the Social Security Administration office. Okay? You can still go to your DFR office, but they're going to send you to your Social Security office. Okay? Because Social Security has to determine whether you're disabled or not. And that's kind of the bottom line. That's what we were talking about earlier, about determining eligibility. Okay? If the federal government says you're not disabled, you're not qualified for Medicaid disability. And I don't know, somebody earlier was asking me, saying that their child's not considered disabled by the state. Well, it's changed now. The federal government is doing the determination. Okay? So if you're receiving SSI, then you're automatically eligible for Medicaid disability. Okay? With the changes, they also changed how much in resources you can count. Okay? So they count $2,000 for a single person or $3,000 for a couple, and they exempt a house and a car. They do count your resources, your savings accounts, your retirement plans, cash value insurance, land, farming equipment. They do not count parental income once your child reaches 18. Okay, and that's the big reason I wanted to talk to people now, because most people say, we make too much money, we have too much money, we're never going to be eligible for Medicaid disability. Your child will grow up. And the way the health care laws are written now, everybody has an individual policy. You can still buy a policy for your disabled child under you, but you have to buy a policy for them. So this, however, could be an option for you after your child is 18. Okay? The great thing about Medicaid disability is there is no durable medical equipment cap. Okay? Hoosier Health-Wise has a cap of $5,000 lifetime cap. So you buy one wheelchair or one hearing aid and you've met your lifetime cap. Okay? This particular Medicaid plan does not have a durable medical equipment cap. So, for instance, my 21-year-old son uses a device to speak. Well, he's had 3 devices with through Medicaid. We've been on waiver for 15 years. So he's eligible every 5 or 6 years to have a upgrade on his communication device. Okay. If he were on Hoosier Health-Wise, he would have gotten one machine when he was 3, and he wouldn't be eligible for anything else because he would have met his lifetime cap. Okay? The other thing is the drug formulary is huge with Medicaid disability. It covers a lot of drugs that Hoosier Health-Wise does not cover. A lot of psych medicine, a lot of drugs for kids with bipolar or other psychiatric issues that Hoosier Health-Wise doesn't always cover. Okay? You can enroll your child in Medicaid disability. Okay, and what services is it? Why would you want to have Medicaid disability? Well, it pays for a lot of things that even your private insurance won't pay for. It will pay for feeding tubes. It will pay for diapers. It will pay for devices that your child might need. It would pay for adaptable equipment. It pays for a lot of things that your child might need that private insurance does not. It also allows you, on Medicaid disability, they pay for speech therapy, music therapy, OT once a week for us, whereas most private therapies say you can have 10 a year or 15 a year or whatever their limit is that you can have. But Medicaid disability goes by need. So if you can prove the need, then they pay for that. Okay? All right. Does anybody have any questions? I feel like I'm kind of quick here about all this.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
We have already applied, when we got our diagnosis, we did send an application out for Medicaid. Taylor said when she was sick, she had to be evaluated.
Okay, that's Medicaid waiver.
Okay.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay.
I will talk waiver for a minute, but Michelle is here. I'm sure she can answer my questions. Yes.
So we should still do the social security application.
Well, here's the deal. If you are on a Medicaid waiver, you're considered a Senate 30 kid, and technically, you're supposed to be rerouted around Social Security because it's not based on your income, it's based on, waiver is based on your child's income. So, right now, because she's on a waiting list, they would base it on your income, they wouldn't base it on.
She's only 3.
Correct.
So they're saying to do this now.
Well, you need to apply for waiver now. Yes.
That's what we did. Yeah,
Right,
okay.
yes, correct. But you're not gonna have to, jump through the SSI hoops unless they ask you to go through your disability until she's 6. because it's, okay, let me step back and just. Okay, because we're talking apples and oranges here. Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
let's talk about waiver for 1 second, and I'll skip this for a minute. We'll just go with some questions.
sorry.
No, it's fine. You should apply for waiver. At
Okay.
any age you think that your child might be disabled or needs services, you should apply for it now, because there is a waiver. The way the process works now is if you apply before they're age 6, you get a waiting slot. But when they're 6, they've got to go through the disability eligibility component. And if they're not considered disabled, they're taken off the list. If they're considered disabled, they'll stay on the list where you put yourself in that order. That's why I tell parents they should apply, okay, even before 6. But you have to keep up with that. You have to notify BEADS every year, the Bureau of Disability Development, every year and say, I want to stay on the waiting list. This is my address. Do not remove us, kind of thing. Okay?
Nobody told me that.
Okay. Well, they want you to do that annually, and there's a big date stamped on your top of your application. That's the date around the time that you should call and let them know. Okay. For years and years, they told us, don't have parents call us. We don't want, because we had asked, would say to parents, well, just call and find out where you are in the waiting list. And they would yell at us and say, please don't tell parents to call us. And now the whole procedure is different. They actually want parents to call yearly so they can keep the waiting list in some sort of order, okay? But if your child is under 6, just know when they turn 6 that they'll have to go through this disability eligibility portion. If they're over 6, the eligibility disability portion is part of your application process to get on the waiting list, okay? Everybody got that? Okay. All right, now I'm gonna step back and talk about just Medicaid disability, and this is where it gets confusing because your insurance when you're on the waiver is Medicaid disability. But you can have Medicaid disability without waiver services. Okay, does everybody kind of understand that? Okay. You can apply directly for Medicaid disability to get disability insurance, okay, without applying for the waiver. But you have to meet a pretty rigid, strict income. You can't, it's limited to 100% federal poverty level, which is about $721 a month. I'm sorry, it's $973 a month now, okay? So if you make more than $973 a month, they're not going to accept you for Medicaid disability. However, when you apply for waiver, it's the individual with who you're applying for, it's their income that counts. So parental income is waived because it's not part of the application process. It's the child's income. So I would stress kids should not have savings bonds or health insurance or land or anything else, they shouldn't be anybody's will unless they have a special needs trust set up to put the money in, because it will declare them ineligible because there still is a income and resource component to being on waiver, but parental income is not involved, okay? So that's, yes.
Did you just say they shouldn't be on insurance?
No, they shouldn't have life insurance policy in it. Like
Okay.
grandma dies and he gets $10,000, you'll be ineligible.
It shouldn't be the
for waiver.
beneficiary.
Correct. I'm sorry, I worded that.
No, you're fine.
Well, it took me 10 years to get my in-laws to remove my boys from their will. And I prayed the whole time that they never died because they would lose their waiver. Yes.
What about college funds?
Well, all I can say is talk to somebody who understands finance and special needs. Okay? If you're in doubt, I always say if you're in doubt, don't do it. But you could talk to somebody who understands finance
find
Yeah,
it?
Because he'll be coming here one evening, and he
Yeah.
does a lot of presentations.
Yes, he does. He sets up a lot of special needs trusts and he understands, all of those sorts of things. The ARC has a state one that you can buy into. There's lots of different ways to set up special needs trusts, but before you put a lot of money in your child's name and apply for waiver, you need to figure all that stuff out. Especially before they get a slot. Okay. All right. Medicaid disability used to have what they call a spend down. Okay, so if you were eligible for Medicaid disability through your disability, but were over on assets and resources, you could buy into the insurance just like you would buy private insurance. You would have to pay a copay every month to buy into the insurance. Well, because we've moved to a 1634 state, we no longer have that spend down, okay? So people that had the spend down either remained eligible because it was under the $973 a month, or if they were over, they're sent to the marketplace to buy a plan. And there's really not a lot of plans on the marketplace. In fact, there's none that cover special ed, special needs services. They're all like your private insurance, so they're all pretty rigid. You know, they might cover speech therapy, but they might only give you 8 sessions a year or 15 sessions a year, and that's all they would cover. So just know that, but changes are brewing. People are bubbling about that. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about Medicaid disability and how it's changed? More or less, what you really have to know is that we're funneled all, and the federal government is deciding who's disabled and who's not, and it's going to be even across the board. Instead of the state deciding no and the feds say yes and all that kind of confusion. Yes, ma'am.
You may have already covered this, I came in
Yes.
a little bit late.
Yes.
So when your child has Medicaid disability, do you go over if it covers any ABA or?
It does not, currently, it does not cover ABA.
Okay.
Okay? But I would say to parents that your child will be 18 someday. Okay? My child is 21, and I would not give up his waiver for anything, even though waiver does not pay for ABA currently. That too is an ebb and flow thing. It used to pay for ABA, and now it doesn't pay for ABA. So there have been federal lawsuits, California, Ohio, that the courts have said, yes, the federal government has to somehow pay for ABA, but the state of Indiana has not decided who and how that's gonna happen, okay? But I would say to parents, think about your child's future when applying for waiver. Don't think their need right now, because there's a waiting list for waiver, okay? Now, they're trying to get rid of the waiting list. They're moving families off as fast as they can. However, we've run into the problem at ASK. We have so many families moving into the waiver system and not enough providers providing services, so it is kind of stagnant. But, like I said, the tides flow and weave, and, you know, we work with what we have, and this is the way it is today, and who knows what tomorrow will bring. Yes.
My son is 23,
Uh-huh.
and when he was on the we waited 12 and a half years to get on the waiver, and
Okay.
it's so much faster now. So even,
Right.
it does seem like 4 years is a really long time.
Right.
They really have made a lot of progress than how it used to be.
Correct. Correct, yes, they are moving families off quite rapidly. However, the waiting list is still quite long. It's still years long. But yes, it's just something to think about. And that's why I said, if your child's 3, you can still put them on the waiting list. And you can always say at age 9, hey, we're good, we don't need them anymore, and take yourself off. And that's a much better proactive way to do it than to wait till he's 10, 11, 12 and apply, and then there's still a 10-year waiting list and you're waiting 10 more years for services. Yes?
And tell me if I understood you correctly, once you're on the Medicaid waiver, then you can get Medicaid disability for your child?
Correct.
And that's based upon their income and not the parents?
Correct.
So what would be the benefit of getting that Medicaid disability insurance if they're already covered under your insurance before you do?
Well, you can use it as a secondary, and it pays for everything that your private insurance does not pay for. It pays the co-pays, it pays his deductible, it pays everything that your private insurance does not. And if your private insurance says he can only have 6 therapy sessions, Medicaid disability will pay for all of the rest of them if you prove me.
And that Medicaid disability insurance is available at any time when you're on the waiver,
Correct.
even the waiting list for the waiver?
Yeah. You have to be on the actual waiver. Any other questions? Okay. Basically, there are 4 waivers out there. For community-based waivers, there's a family support and the community integration habilitation waiver. The community integration habilitation waiver, those of us that were already on waiver, that's the one we were grandfathered into. Family supports waiver, that's the one, if your number comes up, that's the waiver you're put on. Okay, the aged and disabled waiver and the traumatic brain injury waiver are medically based waivers, and you have to meet a level of nursing care need to get those waivers. There is less of a waiting list, there's still a waiting list for those, but there's less of a waiting list for those. But most kiddos with classic autism do not meet the nursing care need for those 2 waivers. Okay, so these are the services that the waivers provide. And it's pretty extensive. With family supports waiver, you're given $16,500 a year. And you as the consumer can choose what services you want on this list to spend for $16,500 a year. Okay, that's why it's called family support. It's to support your family, whatever your needs might be. Maybe you need behavioral intervention, or maybe you want music therapy, or maybe you want some respite care. Whatever your child's individual need might be, that's what you can use the money on. Okay? All right? Any questions? I have to say, we've been on waiver 15 years, and I can't imagine what our life would have been like before that, because my husband's private insurance through his company flat out says we do not cover autism spectrum disorder therapies. It says it right on the front of. So without waiver services, I don't know where we would be, because we couldn't even get OT or speech, even if it was just 6 sessions a year, we couldn't even get that because of their diagnosis. Okay.
Christine?
Yes.
May I ask you,
Yes.
what services do you use that you find the most important to your?
Well, I am on the community integration, and we use the residential rehabilitation a lot. Our daughter goes to a university in Ohio, and she's on a collegiate team, so we like to go watch her on the weekends. So we use our respite hours on weekends in the fall and the spring to go watch her play. And my husband and I could not do that if it weren't for waiver. Our boys both take music therapy. Our son Cameron gets his job support. He works 25 hours a week. He gets job support through the waiver. we did have electronic monitoring in our house because our 21-year-old used to run. And by run, I mean like he runs 6-minute miles, 5 and 6 miles at a time, and he would be like 10 miles away before the police would find him. So we had originally some electronic monitoring, and then some cute therapists said, why don't you just put a stop sign on your door? He's never ran away again. So, it was like Dr. McLeavy was saying, sometimes the simplest things work for you. So yes, if you come to our home, we have stop signs on our door still, even though it's been like 8 years since he's run away, we still have stop signs on all of our
Can
doors.
he still run 6-minute miles?
He's fast. Yes. My husband used to run with him. He quit about 5 years ago. My husband had a traumatic brain injury, and my husband is an avid runner and still runs every day, but he runs 12-minute miles now and not 6-minute miles, and so we don't run with our son anymore. We watch him run in an enclosed area. Yes. So without waiver, we wouldn't really have a family life, especially in our situation where we're juggling 2 boys with autism and we're trying to support our daughter. When they were little, just to go to the grocery store by myself was hard. Now people say, why don't you take your boys to the grocery store? I'm like, are you kidding me? No, I don't think so. But it's nice now they have staff, they can go out in the community, do what they want to do. You know, they can take Cameron to work for us back and forth. We don't have to provide that transportation for him. It's nice to have medical needs met too, so expensive medical tests are all paid for after they've been approved. But yeah, that's all been really nice.
So what's the
Yes.
difference between family supports and community?
Okay. The family supports is what they're putting everybody on when you get off the waiting list, and it's $16,500 limit a year. This budget has to be under the amount you would if you would institutionalize your child with the same needs. So it's a cost comparison.
So is that going away?
This,
Well, is it like,
Who knows?
like they're putting everyone into family support
they're
now?
putting everybody in here because they're trying to get everybody off the waiting list. So they figured instead of having people wait 10 years for all this money and all these services, we'll give everybody a little bit of service and we'll get a bunch of families off the waiting list. Yes, Michelle.
I was just gonna add, there are certain pretty strict criteria by which a child can get on
Yes.
community integration,
Yes.
rehabilitation waiver, but
Yeah.
it's strict, like both caregivers
It's-
pass away or
correct.
over the age of 80.
Over the age of 80.
Since you were already in it,
Yes, I have helped 2 families in the last 5 years get over here that were on this, get over here. It's very difficult, the criteria for this now. I'm waiting for the day where they initially when they started family support, was it 3 years ago or whatever, everybody over here got a 10% cut in services. So you had to cut 10% of your budget. It hurt, but it didn't hurt that bad. I'm waiting for them to say that, a bunch of this is gonna go away, but it was just luck of the draw that we've been on the waiver for that long and we were indoctrinated into the larger waiver. But yes, I'm waiting for the other shoe to come, but we'll just have to see.
So it's probably easier to get your child into a residential setting than it is to get the community integration and rehabilitation
No.
services?
No. No, my 23-year-old, it's still a long job. The problem is if they have the waiver and they want to go residential, or you just say putting them in a residential situation.
Just putting them, so
You-
this is supposed to be saving them money on not
Correct.
providing them services in a
Correct.
residential place.
Correct, yes.
So I just thought it would be ironic and so like the
Yes.
government, if it were just easier to put them in the
Well,
residential
the
setting.
problem
then-
is the government has made it really hard for you to break your parental rights. They've made it really hard if they're not over 18. If they're over 18, it's much easier to put them in a residential situation. But if they're under 18, the state has made it very difficult for parents to say, I can't deal with them anymore. I need to put him there and you need to pay for it. The state's, it's hard. Parents have to go through the legal system to do that. Any other questions? Okay, I just put this on here just for you to see the differences in services for the medical needs waivers. The services are much more medically based, you know, in-home care, a personal attendant, meals brought to them, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so here's the changes with waiver that happen. So if you're receiving a waiver, you can have up to $2,163 a month in income. If your income exceeds that, you're required to set up a Miller Trust. And the reason it's highlighted is because even at Ask, we've already gotten phone calls from people that got notices from the state. You're on waiver, your income is more than $2,163 a month, you need to go set up a Miller Trust. They go to a lawyer, not a special needs lawyer, and the lawyer sets up a special needs trust and not a Miller Trust. If it's not a Miller Trust, it doesn't save you, okay? And so that's why I have it highlighted. If, for instance, you are on waiver and you made more than that a month, you have to set up a Miller Trust. And the Miller Trust, all the excess income for that month is placed in the trust. And then the following month, it's used to pay your medical bills prior to the state paying your, now the trust money is used prior to the state kicking in and paying, okay? When you die, the money goes to the state of Indiana. Okay? Your family does not get the money in the trust or anything like that, okay? That is why my son works 25 hours a week and he's on waiver. So we don't get close to this number. It's kind of I don't know why they picked that particular number, but that's the number that the state decided on, okay? This affects a lot of elderly people that are on waiver because they might get a pension or something, plus their social security check, and if it's more than $2,163, to keep waiver services, they have to set up this Miller Trust. You could choose not to have waiver services and give up your waiver slot if you don't want that money to go in Miller Trust, but then it's up to you to pay for your own insurance after that. Okay? I'm only the messenger. All these faces are like. I actually taught this in my long seminar, and I've had people yell at me, and I'm like, okay. So really quick, I wanted to talk about 1915, which is for mental illness. If you are on an MRO through the state, and you know if you were or not, and you have a mental illness primary diagnosis, okay, so this would be before the autism, which some of our kids do, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, any mental illness primary diagnosis, then you could be eligible for this 1915, which is like a waiver, only it's for mental health issues, okay? You have to have an income, I think it's at 150% federal poverty level. It's higher than the 100% poverty level. I don't even know what you call them, the people that were in charge of mental health waivers, the MROs, they went to the state before the law was passed and said, do you really want all these waiver people kicked off of their waiver and not taking their meds? And the state said no, and they said, well, then we need a safety net to catch most of these people that are already mental illness waiver. And this is, if you make the parameters this, then we'll catch 99% of them. And so that's what the state did. That's why they have this exception to the rule. They have to have gone through the adult needs and strength assessment, and they have to have scored a 3 or higher. They have to show that they have impairment for self-management, either physically or behaviorally. So they have to have all of, to meet the criteria, they have to have demonstrated all these nice things. And then they would qualify for, they're calling the 1915, which is, it's a waiver for people that have mental illness. Okay. All right. Questions? I made you brain dead, right? I
Can you
know
just
it's-
start over?
Sure.
Can you repeat about the wait list for waiver, that
Yes.
it's up to us to call them on our annual day?
Yes, when you apply for waiver, this is the advocate in me, I'm gonna put my little advocate on it. You should never hand anybody your application without seeing them stamp the date on it and say, could you make a copy of that for me? And so then you have the official state date, because they date stamp any application that comes into their office. And then you can get a copy of it, and it's got the date stamped on it, and you know that that date is the date you need to call them every year. And all you have to do is say to the operator, whoever answers the phone, is saying, I'm verifying my wait list status. And they'll put you through to whoever's typing in the computer and saying, what's the child's name, what's their social security number? I verify you're at this address. That's the thing. When I first started working at ASK 9 years ago, the state came to ASK and said, would you do a phone survey for us? We don't believe there's that many people waiting on the waiting list. We're gonna give you a list of 100 names. We wanna know how many people are waiting. Well, this was 9 years ago. I had to call almost 400 families to get answers because a third of the people had moved. So their addresses were incorrect. So the state notifies you that your waiver slot is up by sending you certified mail to the address on your, that you gave the application. So if you don't call annually and say, I moved to here, you'll miss your letter, you'll miss your slot.
Otherwise, you would get an annual letter, or not?
No, they only send the certified letter that your number has come up and you're the lucky winner of a waiver slot to the address that's on your application unless you call. And a lot can happen in 9-10 years if you're on a waiting list. Okay? So that's one thing, and if you ever move, that's, you know, where you have to send people your new forwarding address. The beads office is one of those people that needs, I moved. But they want you to call and tell them, they don't want you to mail it into them and say that. That's confusing for them. But yes, they'd like you to do that every year, so that they know you're still waiting. Because if they don't think you're waiting, they'll take you off the waiting list. Okay? It's a way for the state to actually zoom through a waiting list more. They don't know where people live, and they can't send them a letter, so. Yes, sir?
Could you go back and clarify the Miller?
Yes. Yes, I can, because, okay, we're talking about waiver. So this means the person with the disability's income, not your family's income, just the person with the disability. They cannot have an income of $2,163 or more. And if it's more, they have to set up the Miller Trust. And you have to get a lawyer involved to set that up. It's a legal thing. There are lawyers doing it pro bono in every state, but I think they're limited to 2 or 3 apiece. So most people that need to set this up, the state has already notified and said you need to set it up. But it cannot be a special needs trust. It has to be a Miller Trust.
Gotcha.
you can have a special needs trust that you dump extra money in for your child to live off of and use to live off of. But their income cannot be over $2,163. Okay?
So just look at that scenario, if they're under 18
Yes,
and they're still in our care,
yes.
this is kind of moot point, but once they turn 18,
It's,
they come in.
it's always their income for waiver. So if they're under 18 or over 18, it's whatever their income is.
Okay.
Okay? What happens with some families is they have trust funds, or they have a grandparent that leaves them their house or a car or whatever. And you have to be kind of careful about how many resources you get to get on waiver that way.
So if you keep the family resources independent
Correct.
through a guardianship and
Through a special needs trust, yes.
the person can still qualify for a
Correct.
Medicaid waiver, and then
Yes,
the family can supplement
correct.
living and.
Yes, that's what a special needs trust is. It's supposed to supplement. You know, it's supposed to be extra money for them to go on a family vacation to Florida with their family afterwards, or whatever. Yes.
What's considered income?
Anything the feds can tax is considered income. Okay? It's taxable income.
So it's, for instance, a savings account in their name that's built up prior to that point.
Can't have more than $2,000 in it.
Okay.
Okay?
So this is like, say our daughter, we get the letter at age 6, which that would be
Yes.
4 years from.
Yes,
we apply.
you would be determined ineligible if she has more than $2,000 in her name.
So what do you do?
Well, we got rid of all of our kids' savings account and set up a special needs trust and put the money in a special needs trust, because then nobody can touch that money.
But the savings account's not income. It's just, you're just saying, or is that a
In the
different?
special needs
No,
trust, it's
we're-
like-
Well, when you said the savings account, where does that come from, the 2,000?
Well, somebody asked about when you apply for waiver,
Yes.
you can't have
Oh,
more
okay, I
than
see.
$2,000 in your name.
I got it.
So basically,
It's an
it's
asset,
not that you
asset,
have any
yeah.
more, right? It needs to be in the Miller Trust. Or in
No,
a special needs.
no Miller Trust.
Okay.
Okay, Miller Trust is if you're on waiver and your monthly income is more than $2,163. So my son, he hovers at around $1,500. And we keep him there because we don't want him to go, because this number is gonna fluctuate, because this number was made by politicians, okay? I'm just telling you. I've lived in the system long enough to know. Okay, so we don't allow our son to work any more than 25 hours a month, because we never want him to go over that 2163 to set up a Miller Trust for him.
Okay, 'cause
But what you're talking about is when you apply for waiver, part of the eligibility is they can't have more than $2,000 in their name. So they can't have a trust fund or a savings account or bonds or be somebody's beneficiary for a life insurance policy that's over $2,000. If they do, they're considered not
if it wasn't a
eligible.
special needs trust, it would be okay.
Correct.
Okay. But if it goes to the Miller Trust Fund, like you say they have the income older, they
Right.
can use that money at any time out of the trust
Well,
fund? Like a
no,
savings-
the
with a
Miller
checking
Trust,
account,
the
or-
state uses to pay medical bills with. And you never see that money again. The state
Oh,
of
okay,
Indiana
okay.
takes it when they're
So
done.
Miller Trust is bad.
Well, no, it's a way for somebody to be a full working adult, have a disability, and still get waiver services. Okay, that's the way the
Okay, I see,
state,
okay.
you know, and some people need waiver services. They need somebody to help them bathe and cook and get out of bed and drive them to work. But they make such a good income that part of that money is put into a Miller Trust so it can pay for their medical expenses.
Okay.
So in my case, in our
Yes.
case, me and my
Yes.
husband, we have
Yes.
a college fund and we have life insurance. It
Yes.
should go all to special needs trust
Correct.
now. Okay, that's,
I'm not gonna give you financial advice, but if it were me, I would take it out of my child's name, because it will make you ineligible for waiver if they have more than $2,000 in their name. That's all I'm saying. You can do what you want.
And you want to be eligible, but if the time comes and you decide that you don't need that, or it's not in the best interest, then you have
Correct.
the option to decline.
So when the, let's say at 6, you're like, yes, gosh, we need it, we can't even tie our shoes yet, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. You move everything to a special needs trust, blah, blah, blah. 10, suddenly we're like, okay, we're doing age appropriate things, we're grade level, we're gonna get a high school diploma. You can withdraw from waiver list and you can pull the stuff out of special needs trust and say they don't have a disability anymore. We're gonna put it in a 529.
Right, because we're still in that limbo, we don't know
Correct.
what the future is.
Oh, I know. And don't let anybody tell you they know the future, because they don't. Just saying. Yes, Michelle?
I was just gonna say, since we're talking about 529 college
Yes.
plans, just one thing to be aware of is there is a bill before Congress, it's called the ABLE Act.
Yes.
And what it would be, it has enough votes to pass, but it hasn't been brought to a vote. And what it would set up is something that's like a 529 plan, but it would be for people with special needs to help pay for post-secondary education opportunities, like job coaching or technical school, or something like that. So
Right.
for someone with a disability who would not be able to go to college, it could help pay for other types of training so that they could further their education or get job-related education. But it's stalled in Congress, so if
I
you
heard
are,
it pass the House today,
great.
but the
It's gotta get
Senate,
through the
it's
Senate.
not on the Senate's docket to vote on. So if you want that to pass, everybody call their senator and say, we want the ABLE bill.
And the good news is there are only 2 senators in Indiana.
There
so
you
just
go.
make 2 phone
That's
calls.
right.
Senator
That's right.
Donnelly, Senator Coates.
Okay. Okay. I did hear, Michelle, from what I read on the disability report, that if the Senate passed it, they're gonna have to go to arbitration because they're arguing over the amount they're allowed.
2 different versions.
Whatever. I believe it when it's passed.
So what kind of programs would that support? Like,
From what I understand, it would support, once your child's disability is out of high school at age 21 or 22, depending on the state and when their birthday is and all that good stuff, it would help pay for post-secondary education. So they could go perhaps to a technical school to learn culinary arts or to learn hospitality management or to learn other technical skills that would help them gain employment.
Right.
So it would be like instead of saving pre-tax dollars to go to college, you would be able to save pre-tax dollars for programs for your child after they are not eligible for high school anymore, to further their education.
Yes, ma'am.
and I know as parents of young kids, this seems really frightening, and it is kind of, but I don't know what your experience is, but I've always found that people who work for disability and SSI, that they are very helpful, and every year you have to go through an eligibility, and they'll really help you, and, you've got to be proactive and do a lot, but they will do.
Yes.
I find that they're very kind and
Yes.
want to help you and make it as easy as possible, so
And
it's not.
Be nice to your SSI people,
Yes.
because they unfortunately have had this thrown at them where they're like, all these waiver people are calling them, and they're like, they weren't even educated about the changes until after the changes had occurred, okay? So just be kind to people that don't know, when you call up and they don't know, just ask our supervisor. That's what I.
So does the state look at, like, each year, you're already on Medicaid waiver?
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about, let's say your income goes up.
Yes.
Like you said, like, I don't know, you get money in a will or
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Is the state are you supplying the information
Yes.
for your child
I
every
have
year?
I have to every 3 months give my son's income to waiver.
And then if you were over it, they would take you off?
Well,
And
they
then-
wouldn't take me off, they'd say, set up another trust. And if I refused, then they would take me off.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Michelle.
I was gonna say, my daughter's 17, so we're not in the over 18, and she's not working realm, and so she just did her redetermination. She's been on the waivers since she was 9, I think. She's one of those lucky kids that squeaked by before they closed it. And so every year, I found it's much easier to drive to the Department of Family Resources
Yes.
and give them all the information, because then it does actually get to the central office.
Right.
I found when I mail it in, it doesn't seem to all get there, usually when the first page gets there for some reason, so, and muffin diplomacy go with the basket of muffins, you will get really great service.
That's right.
And so every year we have to supply them with our income, even though it's not
Right.
supposed to count. They have to show that they got it, her income, which she doesn't have, of course. And then we had to, this year, with these changes, the new thing we had to do is we had to go to Anderson, the Social Security office, and apply for Social Security so she could get denied because of our income, to show that we did apply for Social Security so that she can still
That
stay on
she
the
met
waiver.
the disability eligibility, which is
Right.
what SSI does, is they determine are you
Yes.
disabled or not.
Right, right.
But it
And
got
they were-
confusing at first, because they
It
were
was,
like
it
denying
was.
people, and then people were like, but I'm on a waiver.
But they said you just have to show you applied and then you got denied and then all will be well, and so far that's proved to be true. But they were very helpful, yeah, again, a basket of muffins or a box of cookies goes a long way.
Have your kid make it.
And my other thing is, just like tonight, make sure you're talking apples and apples and not apples and oranges. People throw around the word Medicaid really easily. Make sure you're talking about what you called about. Make sure you're talking about waiver or Medicaid disability, and you're not talking about Hoosier Health Wise, because that will send you in a different realm. Okay? So just remember, just like people get confused here, people there typing in a computer, and they have their 6 hours of computer training, and they're confused by what you're asking. So just be patient with people. Okay? More questions? Yes, ma'am.
Who would be the best resource if you're just deciding between all these different, medical options for your child, say, that has autism, and maybe they're on Hoosier Health-Wise right now, and they have SSI, and then you're looking at getting a waiver too. I mean, some things affect other things, and it can get kind of confusing.
That is
So
correct.
who would be the best, do you have any resources that can help us to find a really good long-term plan? Okay, we want this program because we know what our son needs, or we want this
Right.
program, and this one will affect us this way because of my son's, my husband's income, or,
Right.
it just gets
Right,
confusing.
correct. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
I know you can call someone to ask, but they're just gonna ask you what your priority question is. What's your priority for your child? And then they're gonna say, well, this program will do that, this program will do that, that program will not. So I don't know if that's what you want, or if you're talking, you wanna sit down with a financial advisor and talk about all of those things.
Right, I think that would be, obviously, for anyone here, would probably be a great option to have a good
Right.
financial resource.
Correct.
Because we're all concerned, I'm sure, about finances, especially when you have a child with special needs.
Correct.
But,
And it will happen fast. I choke at the thought that in 6 months, all my kids will be in their 20s. But it happens, you can say, I'll think about that later, but some advanced planning and some advanced knowledge actually will help you. Not that this will be the same in 10 years when your child is an adult, because it's a state and federal program. It changes on a whim, but at least you have knowledge that there are programs there available. And, oh, I thought I heard about that, maybe I should find more about that. But either a financial advisor or call someone to ask. And if there's specific questions about things you want covered, then that, that's kind of the way I would look at it. Okay? And although we love our ABA center here, unfortunately, we can't take them with us when they're 25 or 30 years old. So we have to think about plan for their future and some security for them, okay? I'm done unless you guys have more questions.
Thank you very much. Everyone feel free to stay. It's a good time to network and socialize and talk about your kids. And I think we still have some refreshments left in the, I call it the lunchroom, in the kids' lunchroom. So feel free and catch up. And I'm sure Christine would take even more.
I will. I'll be here till my childcare leaves at 8:15. So I live 7 minutes away, so if I leave here at 8, I'll be good. So yes.
Quick question.
Sure.
Do people have experience with the CareStar versus Columbus organizations here in Indianapolis? for that? Medicare for that? Looks like the other 4 are out of Minneapolis, so.
Well, we're still in we're just kind of, our name just came up for Medicaid waiver.
Yay!
So we have,
case management.
it's
Yes.
the company, there's 5 companies that you choose from to
Correct.
provide the service, and we just don't know anything about any of them. So I didn't know if anybody knew anything about any of them.
So for our case manager, we go through IPMG.
Yeah.
And I've been with them and I bounced around probably 5 years, and I've been happy with them.
Okay.
So, but it's all a key to find your good person who knows what they're talking about, so.
Interview.
You can
You
switch.
pick a provider. You can pick a provider that you like and tell them, give them some parameters of who they're looking for and say, please send us out 2 candidates, and they can come back to back, and you can actually interview them about what their caseload is and what their experience is and how good are they with paperwork, and is it all digital or do you have to sign stuff? Those are all questions I would ask.
Are you talking about a case manager, or are you
Yes.
talking about a service provider?
No, she's talking about a case.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, this is the provider list, the waiver
The
provider
case
list.
management company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so IMPG is on.
Yeah.
Yes, they provide you a case manager, and your case manager is what I call the engine on the train. And so they say, here's your budget, how do you wanna spend it? And if you say, I want music therapy, they'll give you, here are 3 providers in your area, you have to pick a provider after that. Then they're gonna set up a budget on, this is how you're utilizing your money, they're gonna submit it to the state. This is not an overnight process.
Right,
It averages 6 to 9 months, just so you know. They submit it to the state after you pick your services and your waiver manager and all that, and then they submit it to the state. The state approves your budget. Then you get to go pick the providers. And that might be another issue because a lot of providers, like I was telling you guys earlier, they're moving so many families off, providers have waiting lists now. I know that my music therapy provider has 69 people on their waiting list. And they have 6 music therapists. Okay? So it's not like you're gonna get service, your number's up, you get services. It's still a process. And the first process is picking out who you want to help lead you through the budgeting services part of it. Because you have to decide how are you gonna spend that $16,500. And do you want it all in wrestling?
Right.
Some people do. You don't have to, but some people do. I just wanted to say that I was here for Dr. McGreevy's presentation, and it was very, very like my life, I would say. When he was saying, teach this, we did that when our children were 2 or 3. They listen to us now, but now I have a 23-year-old that goes and walks away from me. So it does come back to slap you, but it does with most young adults. I think they always rebel, and that's why they're parents.